Okay, so today we're continuing on our series called The 5 Things You Need to Know Before You Go. And these are kind of my last words to those of you who are leaving. The 5 key purposes of a Christian, or the 5 key things that a church should be focusing on. And also the 5 things that you should focus on if you ever decide to plan a youth group, just so you know, okay? Because that's ultimately what we train you guys to do, so that you would go over, that you could go anywhere you want, and if there's no community for you to be a part of, to be able to plant a church, okay? So, 3 weeks ago we talked about worship, how that was one of the first things. And to worship is to adore and awe, to give glory to God because He deserves it, because of who He is and what He's done. 2 weeks ago we talked about fellowship. Fellowship is loving one another because of what God has done, loving because He first loved us, and out of that, to meet in community, to encourage one another and stir one another to love and to good works. Last week we talked about discipleship, something that happens in the midst of fellowship, in the midst of community. It's life-on-life learning, life-on-life community, which leads to training in how to be like Jesus based on teaching, example, and advice. And we're all called to be disciples, but we're also called to disciple others. And that's what we talked about last week, okay? Like that really important concept. You're called to be a disciple, to have someone investing in your life, but also you guys are called to invest in the lives of others. And a lot of times when you're young or when you're in youth, that concept is like, oh, you know, I'm too young, I don't have to invest in anything, I just want to focus on my studies, and, you know, no. You are also called, as Christians, as representatives, to mentor, to disciple those who are younger than you in the faith. And if you are here today and you are a Christian, there are people every day that are coming to the faith who are younger than you, okay? So, I'd encourage you guys to consider how you can disciple others. But this week, we're going to look at what happens out of that. In case you can't tell, there's a kind of flow. We have community, we have that fellowship because we worship God. We all worship God, and that's what draws us together. That then leads to discipleship. Discipleship, becoming like Jesus, leads to what we're talking about today, which is service/outreach/ministry. They have different names depending on where you go, so I'm going to use all 3 names so that when you go to a different church, you're not going to get surprised, right? But for the most part, I'm going to use service. And service, well, we're going to find out what that is in a bit. Let's all turn to Matthew 5:13. You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under the basket, but on a stand it gives light to all the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to our Father in heaven. Your calling, one of your purposes as a Christian, is to shine the light of God to this dark world. In light of God's greatness, in light of His grace towards us, we worship Him. Because of His commands, we have fellowship with one another. Because of that, we train others who are younger in the faith. And once we train them, we got to ask the question, we are training them to do something. We're not just training them to be Christians. What does it mean to be a Christian? We're training them to make the world a brighter place. That is what mature Christians do. That is the purpose of discipleship, to train people. So in a sense, I'm training you guys to go out and do this mission. Okay, this is what you're actually supposed to be doing. The main focus, this is the main focus of our practical work. In James 1:27 it says, religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this, to visit orphans and widows in their afflictions, and to keep oneself unstained from the world. In Romans 12 it says, contribute to the needs of the saints, do not be haughty and associate with the lowly. And here, in Jesus' opening statement of His first recorded sermon, that is the Sermon on the Mount, this passage that we just read, Jesus is saying that we are called to be salt and light. So what does that mean? What does that mean to be salt and light? What does it mean to make the world a brighter place? Well, definitely in young people's culture today, there's a different meaning for the word salty. but we're not talking about that. Salt brings flavor. Salt makes things better. You know, I cook. You guys don't know I cook. And you can have tasteless food is bland. That's kind of what it means. It can still be nutritious if it's tasteless, but it is really boring. Nourishing, but boring. We, as Christians, are called to be salt, to bring flavor to this world. We're called to make this world a place of enjoyment. We're called to bring life, to bring taste. Okay? You know, when I was a dance teacher, many people were quite surprised when I would tell them that I was a pastor as well. The reason is because they've had this perception that Christians are boring, that Christians are dull. And when I tell them that, their first reaction was like, "You're a pastor?" Like, every single time. Like, 100% they were really surprised. And I told them that as a Christian, you know, it's actually important for us to have fun. It's actually important for us to bring that enjoyment, that fun, to this world. That's one of the reasons I actually taught dancing in the first place. So that to teach people, both believers and Christians, that it's okay for Christians to be fun people and to enjoy things like swing dancing. Now, I have Christian friends who are photographers, who are filmmakers, who are actors, who are incredibly powerful and honorable politicians, comedians. They all are salt. They're all salty, but not in that sense. They all are salt because they know how to have a good time, but they do so in a way that honors God. Right? So that's the first thing that I want to leave with you guys today. That we as Christians are called to be salt. That's one of the services that we bring to the world. That's one of the things that we do practically. I want you to think about your spheres of influence are. Right? Whether, for most of you it's school, but you're about to go into summer vacation, so it'd be your homes, whether it be your home back internationally, whether it be any sports groups that you're part of. Think of ways that you can make that a more fun and enjoyable environment. That's one of your callings as a Christian. See, Christians have been known for almost the last 100 years now as being boring, conservative, lame, and legalistic. However, in the centuries past, we need to remember that we made great scientific discoveries. We created great works of art during the Renaissance. We wrote plays and poems. We started hospitals and charities. And we even began the concept of modern-day romance. Did you guys know that? The idea of being emotionally connected as part of in marriage and in relationship, beyond purely physical and beyond purely social connection, actually came in a large part from Martin Luther's teachings after he became married. Did you guys know that? It's kind of cool. When I found that, I was like, ooh, wow. Anyway, so, as I'm saying, you guys are called to be salt to the earth. But the second thing we're called to be is called to be light. We are called to be light to the world. Light banishes fear, brings hope. It symbolizes good and the removal of evil. Not only are we called to be fun people, but we're called to shine the light of the goodness of Jesus everywhere we go. What does this look like? Well, it can mean dedicating ourselves to the good of others. And there are so many ways you can do that. Okay, you can volunteer your time in charities by donating things, by being part of missions organizations and going on mission trips, or volunteering with aid groups. That's what it means to contribute to the needs of the saints. You know, there are a lot of great ministries, organizations that are doing good stuff to help people. You guys can take part in that. All right? There are also ways that you can visit widows and orphans in their affliction. You know, you can be part of, you can go visit elderly homes, orphanages, soup kitchens. You can do bread runs. We did a bit of that last year or 2 years ago. And next year, we're actually going to be taking part in something hopefully with Resound. Because Resound will, hopefully, if we organize it in time, we'll be doing a service day where we will go into some of these organizations and help out. You can also, as it says in Romans, choose not to be haughty as a way to shine the light of Jesus, right? Then involves talking with new people or with younger youth who are in Axiom. Make friends with less sociable people or even talking to your next door neighbor. You know, when Mel and I moved into our new place, we discovered that we had like four people living next door to us, and I was like, you know, in Hong Kong, I've never met my next door neighbors before. So one of the first things that we decided once we got settled was we were going to invite our next door neighbors to dinner. And we're going to do that, I think, when we get back from Canada. But yeah, one of the first things we're going to do when we get back from Canada is invite them out to dinner, or not out, to our house, and then we're going to also invite some of our crew as well. And they all speak Mandarin, and so we're going to invite all of our Mandarin-speaking friends. It's going to be awesome. Because I don't speak Mandarin, so yeah. Okay, so these are just examples, right? And they're generally one-off things. But our call to be salt and light is not something that we do just once off. We're called to do that in every part of our lives, all the time. Just like worship, right? Worship isn't something that happens at church. It's something that is part of who we are. Fellowship is not something that's just meant to happen at Axiom. It's meant to be ongoing. Community is not just meant to be once a week. It's meant to be your whole life, right? Life on life. Discipleship is not just meant to be one meetup for coffee once a week, but it's meant to be continual engagement, keeping in contact with one another, being friends, you know, and engaging. Service, outreach is also supposed to be core to every day of your life. So the question that you can ask yourself is, how do I make the world a brighter place? Now, for you guys, there's generally two ways that this can apply. But for those of you who are going to university, I would encourage you guys to ponder this question in light of future jobs, right? For those of you who are, I mean, sure, you're going into uni, you're not going off to work, but as you go into uni, as you make new contacts, as you prepare yourselves for what you're going to study, as you take part in organizations, I want you guys to think, how can you make this world a better place through the work that you plan to do? Now, bear in mind, this is for all of us, not just the graduates, you don't have to fix all the world's problems. There are a lot, and thankfully we are part of a global church where there's a planet-wide body of Christ, and lots of people are also working to make the world a better place. There are many people focusing on different issues. So, when you're thinking of how you can also impact this world, think of what works specifically for you. God works with our talents, our gifts, our circumstances, and our desires, i.e., what you want to see happen, God was the one that placed that desire in your heart. And so don't feel like you need to jump on the bandwagon of whatever is a big social issue right now, but as you prepare for university, or for those of you who are staying, as you live your life and choose what you want to volunteer on and choose what you want to research, think of something which really is impactful to you. You know? For example, some of you guys have heard me share about my flatmate Cian. He's now in Singapore, but for a long time, my flatmate Cian was one of my favorite examples because he's a really cool guy. But he went to Stanford and he studied engineering, and he really loved design, right? And in his course, he got a master's degree from Stanford in engineering, which is pretty cool. But he chose to use his degree to start a company along with some of his friends called Delight. And their goal was to literally bring light to the world. They made these solar-powered lights that are, this is the smallest one. They actually made one that's called I think it's called the D400 or whatever. It's like massive. It can shine like a floodlight for, 8 hours. It's crazy. And what they did was, using their design expertise, they created these super cheap solar-powered lights that would last forever, and they sold them at these really cheap prices to third world countries so that people wouldn't have to use kerosene anymore. Okay? Because kerosene's unreliable, it's dangerous, houses would burn down, and it was bad. And so, they made this a social enterprise. Their goal was not just to make a profit so that they could keep operating, but it was actually to help the society and literally make the world a brighter place. Now, they could only do that because of their design expertise, of which he really enjoyed. Now the funny thing was, my dad found out about these guys through me, right? I was telling him about them, I was showing him their lights, and my dad's Malaysian, and he has a real passion for investing in helping local Malaysians, especially in rural areas. And so when he found out about it, he actually bought a ton of these lights, and he sold them to rubber plantation farmers in Malaysia. The reason that he sold them was because they were using kerosene lamps, but they were wearing them on their heads right here. And what would happen is they would go out to the rubber plantations at night and tap the rubber trees, but they would have to do it before the sun started shining for some reason. And because it was obviously really dangerous, very often they would kerosene would drip on their faces, and then eventually every so often they would get burnt because they would continue on when the kerosene dripped on their faces, but then the fire would land on the things. So my dad saw these lights and they were like, "Wow, this thing was only like $5 US or $7 US." So, and it lasts. I mean, I've had this one for 5 years, right? And they last for ages, and they're really well designed. And so my dad saw this, and it's like, we could really use some of these to help people in that situation. So actually, I was the one that came up with how the rubber plantation owners could do it. All they would need is one of those baseball caps. You know those baseball caps which have the plastic size expander? These things come like this because you're supposed to hang it like that or use it as a stand for studying. All we did was we made them get the baseball cap, wear it backwards, and then stick this inside the expander, and it would work exactly like a headlamp, right? So you didn't need any like fancy strap or anything like that. But I came up with that one day when we were bored. So my dad literally took this, and his marketing as well as his contacts and his desire to impact the rural people of Malaysia led him to pretty much distribute this amongst hundreds of people, and now thousands eventually, as he's partnering with other churches, thousands of rubber plantation farmers in East Malaysia, and making a huge change, right? So, now, obviously there are many problems in the world, right? From environmental to social to political, there's a lot of darkness in the world. You don't need to fix all of it, right? But sometimes there will come issues that you are particularly able to impact, right? God will bring situations that you're able to change based on where you are in your faith, where you are in your life, your circumstances, but also who you are. And that was just one way that God used my dad to bring about change. You know, the last example I'm going to share, I talked about it a couple of weeks ago when I got my new water bottle, but this is my super sweet water bottle. It's made by a social enterprise here in Hong Kong where there was a lady who cared a lot about reducing plastic waste from plastic water bottles. And just so you guys know, I went through like a period for a year where I didn't replace my water bottle, and I did a rough calculation of how many plastic bottles I went through in that time, and I felt very, very convicted, so I went out and got this. But like her organization, they make these really sick water bottles that are designed very well, because not only can you, this is quite dangerous actually, not only can you open it like this and drink from it, but you can also,
there's an empty one right here.
That's alright. You can also use it as a cup, right? So you can share it with a friend, and you can both drink from it as well, but it also makes it really easy to clean. And it looks really sick as a goblet. I mean, that just looks cool. But what I wanted to share was not so much about that, but there are hundreds of organizations of people who are starting these social enterprises. But a big problem for them is usually people who are skilled enough at design or gifted enough to want to, interested enough to want to start social enterprises don't always have that much expertise in the areas of advertising, marketing, and social media, especially in places like Africa, and also in some of the organizations in India. So one of my friends, he was a marketer and advertiser by trade. You know, he was like a really gifted salesperson. He could sell ice to an Eskimo kind of thing. Like, he was really gifted. And And he wanted to do something with his skill set that could really help. But he couldn't think of anything because he wasn't as gifted as design as he is. We were actually all in the same home group. And he didn't have as much contact with the local people. So what he did one day, him and his friend realized, we're really good at selling stuff. Why don't we sell other people's stuff? And so they created this site called Fat Rice, where they help all these social enterprises sell their products to the developed world, right? So basically, they do the marketing, the advertising, because that's what they specialize, and they do it for all these social enterprises so that they don't have to do it, because a lot of the social enterprises suck at it. And I thought that was incredible. I never thought that anyone could redeem marketing. I don't like marketers or advertisers at all, even though that guy was my small group leader for the longest time. And we were friends, but I still didn't agree with what he did. But I was like, how does anyone redeem that? And this was incredible. I mean, they sell stuff, they partner with organizations that help people out of human trafficking, that help do tons of environmental good. So that's what I want to challenge you guys with. You are all called to make the world a brighter place. But right now, for many of you, you're going into university or you're finalizing your last few years of high school. You don't know necessarily where you're going to end up. You don't have as many full design skills, or not design skills, sorry, fully employable skills yet. You guys mostly have generic skills that you have. But that doesn't change the fact that God is already planting desires in your heart. There are 3 things that I have wanted to do since, that I want to achieve to make this world a brighter place. One of them was given to me when I was in grade 11. So when I was you guys' age, I was watching a presentation by an organization called Watoto. Have you guys heard of Watoto? Watoto is an orphanage, and they have a great children's choir. But they were at our church, and they were kind of asking for donations. And I was thinking, wouldn't it be amazing if one day we as people, as a church, or just humans in general, could figure out a way to create an orphanage that wouldn't rely on donations or charity? That was actually my dream when I was in grade 11. And I've been hoping and designing a way to build a self-sustaining orphanage that doesn't require government grants since I was in 11th grade. As a result of that, that was actually one of the reasons I came to Hong Kong, because I wanted to do it specifically in China. And Hong Kong is close to, if not part of China, depending on how you look at it. And while I was here, people saw some of the gifts, and they actually encouraged me to do the second thing which I wanted to do, which was to plant a church that's specifically designed for urban Asia, to train a generation of Christians to do exactly this. The Christian church has lost a lot of this mindset. A lot of people aren't looking for ways to make the world a brighter place. And my hope is to train up not just you guys, but eventually an entire generation of Christians, that this would be what it means to be a Christian. This would be intrinsic to who we were. It wouldn't just be going to church every week, but it would be part of what we're hoping to do. That's the second thing. And then in the midst of all of that, the last thing that I wanted to do, and that I'm currently doing, is I want to teach the church and also the academic Christians of the world that computer gaming and esports aren't evil. And that it's a valid activity for people to take part in. That happens because I'm a gamer, I'm a gamer who experienced a lot of pushback from adults, from pastors, from church leaders, and especially from parents about gaming, right? And while, yes, there are many people who are addicted to computer games, don't get me wrong, I want us also to realize that just like not all movies are bad, or not all music are bad, or not all anything is really a bad thing, there are pros and cons to most new mediums, including gaming and esports, right? So those are the 3 things that I want to do to make the world a brighter place. Those things are unique to my situation. I have a really big heart for orphans because of some of the aspects of my growing up. I have a really big heart for the generation of Christians, the younger generation of Christians, because I fell away from the faith when I was when I was a young person your age. I have a really big heart for gamers who are Christians because I'm a gamer who's a Christian, right? So I want you guys to look in what God has been doing in you. Your gifts, your abilities, the things that you really enjoy doing, and the things that you really have a heart for. You don't need to change everything. You don't need to fix all the world's problems. For you, it could be, I don't like bullies, or I don't like being left out. So I'm going to care for the person next to me, or who I see who's being left out. Or I'm going to stand up for the person being bullied. Or I'm going to encourage that person because I never got any encouragement myself when I was growing up. Whatever it might be for you, right? I want you all, bow your heads right now. I want you to think, and over the next few weeks, I want you to think, what are the things that are unique to you that you can do to make the world a brighter place? Cool? Let's think about that for a few seconds. God, you see all these thoughts, all these desires, all the things that are flowing on in our heads, the situations that we want to see changed, the things that really bother us about these worlds, the darkness that we see. And God, I know that you have called each and every one of us to shine a little light, to bring a little salt to the world that we are a part of. Each and every one of these young people have a place where they bring influence, where they can bring change. Whether it might be really small or whether it might be huge. God, you see what we're all capable of doing. And so, Father, I pray that you would empower us, that you would give us new ideas, but also that you would equip us with the desire and with the ability to change this world. And as we do, that people would see this light that we shine, and that they would give glory to our Father in heaven. In the name of Jesus I pray. Amen.
This presentation has been brought to you by Axiom, Youth Ministry at ECC Hong Kong. For more information, please visit our website at axiomyouth.hk.